Hello, this is Adam Felt. I'm the artist of Atomic Hercules, and this is 11 o'clock comics.
And they're off. It's that time again.
It is. It's a long week.
It has been a long week. A long, aggravating week.
Except for classes.
Yeah, classes are okay. I still get those kids that just have to test my patience, and it's the same ones from last semester. Like first class, send me an email address so I can make you a folder on the Google Drive. They still come to class and look at me like nothing's wrong. I told you 2 classes in a row to send me your email address, and you can't do it. Like, how do you have compassion for these people?
13th grade.
Yeah, I don't get it. But we hope you get it, because this is 11 O'Clock Comics, episode 945, and I'm Vince B.
Ooh, you are Vince B. I am David A. Price.
And we have a guest this week, because Jason is doing whatever Jason does. Yeah, we have the father, the creator of Kankor, the man who will never stop fighting in the mighty Kiss Army. It's Matthew Allison.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for having me.
You sound wonderful.
Thank you.
Back,
Yeah. It's been too long.
I'm glad.
Yeah,
it has been. And
April?
I'm yeah. I was disappointed that I didn't get to see you guys at Heroes Con.
So were we.
Yes. Yeah, you were definitely missed. But that's the one thing, I say it jokingly, but I have to admire you, because I had a consuming love of Kiss up until a certain time, and then you see the warts and the clay feet, right, of my heroes. But you that exists, but you still love them.
Oh, but there was a long period where I despised them. So this is a recent thing, this rekindling of my Kiss love. But I was on your side for a very long time.
But that's still interesting, because Vince is one of the biggest advocates for separating the art from the artist.
I do.
And it's interesting that Kiss is kind of like that line in the sand for you, when we can consider, John Wayne Gacy. There's so many people who you'd be like, listen, art is art.
It's true.
Well, it would help if they had been making decent art over the last 20 years.
But I'm not going to deny that.
I mean, if to put it in weapons of war terms, Gene is like a frickin' souped up nuclear cruise missile asshole. Like he's a heat-seeking asshole. But and Matthew put it into perfect perspective a couple of days ago on Instagram. He sent me an image of Gene from Kiss Alive 2. And he goes, I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, this is the greatest photo in the history of rock and roll. Something like that, right?
Yeah.
And I had to agree with you. That photo is burned into my brain. It's the one where Gene is looking all demony, and he's got the blood dripping out of his mouth, and there's more whites of his eyes than anything. It's he's all sweaty. It's a wonderful photo that from my childhood has given me great joy. But then Gene turned into a giant asshole. And as an adult, I'm like, I can't back this. The guy's a douchebag. The comics that he made for whatever company it was were horrible. And he was acting like they were the greatest things ever. And he named his solo album Asshole. Like, he knows he's a dickhead.
Well, he had that period, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago on Twitter. He was talking about how he was going to trademark his, devil horn hand symbol that he does, which of course Dio was doing as well around the same time. But Gene was going to claim ownership of that he created that. And so he had been talking about it in interviews, and then he got on Twitter and said he was going to do it. So I found this interview with him in Comics Interview from the 80s, where he copped to the fact that it came from Doctor Strange, which anybody with a brain can see. Like, Ditko was making, everybody had those hands in the Ditko comic. And Gene, being a huge comic fan, that's where he got it from, and he admitted it in this magazine. So I scanned that interview and took that paragraph, and I tweeted it at him. And lo and behold, he never went through with the trademark. I don't know if I had anything to do with it, but
You see what you did?
yeah,
You crushed Gene Simmons' dreams.
I hope so.
He'll be okay.
Yeah, I think
Yes,
he
We don't
yeah.
have to worry about Gene.
He moved on to trying to trademark the term OJ for orange juice. So
will. Oh, my God. But just being with Shannon Tweed in her golden ages, I think he has the last laugh.
oh, and Cher, 70s Cher.
No.
Okay, all right.
God.
Shit, give me the Shannon Tweed. All
right.
I'm very superficial. I'm down with that.
Okay, all right.
So all of this is brought to you by who? CheapGraphicNovels.com. CheapGraphicNovels.com can get you the books you want at the prices you are more than willing to pay. OGNs, trade paperbacks, manga, omnibus editions, all that stuff at a fraction of the retail cost, which enables you, your savings that is, enables you to buy more books. That's the recipe. You save, and all that savings is translated into more books. But if you're a first-time customer, here's what you're going to do. Buy something, 1 or 2 books. I'm sure you'll find something. And you will receive an email confirmation saying, thank you for your order. We got you. Here's what you bought, and it's coming real soon. Reply to that email saying 11 o'clock comics sent me, my friend, and Max will give you free shipping on your next order. So you're saving, and you're not paying any shipping. So that's when you buy a Winnebago full of books. Treat yourself. CheapGraphicNovels.com. Yeah.
Well done.
Well, like I said, rough week. And for those of you listening at home, where else would you be listening to? Maybe in the car or at work. We are still tinkering with the sound in the Discord setup. So if it isn't quite right, like last week was not quite right. You may have noticed that 944 went up and then it disappeared. And another 944 replaced it. So I edited it once because we were on a time limit. As I usually do, I turn it around in like a half hour, 45 minutes. And then I listened to it and I'm like, oh, damn, this sucks. So I re-edited it, deleted the old file, replaced it with the new file, but the aggregator thought it was a new file. So there were actually 2 944s. So we got a lot of hits on our last episode.
All right.
Because it was actually 2.
That's
But
the
yeah,
trick.
yeah. So baby steps. We're ironing out all the kinks and feedback, people. If this sounds better than usual, let us know. If it sounds worse than usual, please let us know. And you could do that on the Facebooks, or we still have a Twitter account. Do we?
We've got the 11 o'clock comics Twitter account. You've got you've got Spotify and iTunes comments. Anywhere you got info at 11o'clockcomics.com. You can leave us a voicemail.
Right.
And whatever you want.
Just keep in mind, this is all bargain basement stuff. We don't have a mixer. There aren't multiple inputs coming in where I can diddle with the volumes and the levels. This isn't that. This is basically Discord and a device that captures system audio. David and Jason are recorded to the right channel. I'm recorded to the left channel. So we do that because if one of us is too loud, it can be easily jacked or lowered on the fly. But last week, for whatever reason, Jason and David were so loud, and I just had a difficult time normalizing that sound. So it's in the works. We're going to perfect it sooner or later. You have to admit, it's better than Skype. But that ain't saying much.
I think it is.
Yeah, that's a,
But yeah, just cut us some slack because we've only been doing podcasts. I mean, this
15
show
years.
since 2008, but 2006 is when we've really been. So we'll get there.
yeah. And because it's been a little bumpy week, I'm drinking. Yay.
Oh.
Yes, this is from the Southern Tier Brewing Company, which is from New York, somewhere in New York. Yes, Lakewood, New York. This is called 2X IPA, which means it's a double IPA. It has 8.2% alcohol by volume. It says it's a bold, fruity, floral hop flavor, and I have 4 of them. So,
Damn.
Whoa.
yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
you have 4 of them lined up, not that you've had 4 of them.
no, I haven't had 4 of them yet.
Okay.
I have 4 on deck. 3 on deck and 1 in my mouth. So yes, Southern Tier 2X IPA. Really good. And it's cost effective. You can get a 15 pack for like $20.
Damn.
Not bad. That
No,
good.
not at all.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. What are you sipping on, Matthew?
Well, I was going to have a non-alcoholic Heineken, but my good neighbor Frank told me that I should have a non-alcoholic Pabst Blue Ribbon. So
Nice.
that's what I'm drinking.
Is it good?
Yes, it's very good.
When he goes on vacation and returns, do you say, "Welcome back, Frank"? Or is it "Welcome home, Frank"?
I say, here's to your fuck, Frank.
Yeah. Spacker Dave. There you go.
Good
Nice.
Lord.
Dap, what are you drinking?
Well, I'm not having wheat water, but I am having the same thing I poured for myself. I made for myself last night. Not that the listeners need to know about that, but this is a Japanese gin and tonic.
Wow, that sounds really good.
It is really good. I mean, it's the Japanese gin isn't as smooth as like the Hendrix or the Drumshango, the orange citrus that I like, but it's still good. It's still a nice gin, but you have to usually do the traditional cocktail of a gin and tonic with like the lime juice so it's a traditional gin and tonic. Usually what I can do with the other gins is just 2 ingredients. It's just the gin and the tonic, but here you have to actually go a little bit more extra. But it is still extremely tasty, and it's goes down real easy, and that can cause trouble.
Now, is that gin warm or cold?
You know, it's so hot outside. You always need something to cool you off.
It's cold gin time again. Yes.
You know.
You can never really escape the bastards, can you?
No.
No.
Sorry. Just
all right.
watch the numbers of listeners just dropping off at every Kiss reference.
Yes.
Is this an all Kiss episode? Are we going to do the whole Image series, the Psycho
Oh,
Circus?
Lord.
Leading
Angel Medina's coming in a little while. Yeah.
Oh,
Nice.
Wouldn't that be awesome? Okay,
would be,
no
yeah.
bullshit. No bullshit. I really like that series.
I never read it. I actually thought the art was decent for a Kiss comic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a McFarlane comic. It looks really
Yeah.
good. But the story, yeah, whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. But it's Angel Medina, and I really like Angel Medina. Warlock and the Infinity Watch, yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Speaking of good stuff, yes. I don't really want to get into the specifics of this 12-issue maxi series, but I would like to touch upon the implications of it and maybe the origins, in a sense. Matthew, have you ever read Doomsday Clock?
No. Other than I think I maybe read the first issue when it came out.
Okay. Well, I fell off. I made it to about issue 7, and I read no further. I don't know why. It's just one of those things.
That's not true.
What do you mean?
We all read the 10th issue as a standalone single issue. But yes,
We
I mean,
did?
as far as the series, yes, we did. I asked you both. We've got an episode on it. But yes.
Okay, good.
You read the 10th issue, but that was just like, the one random issue after you fell off and then
Right.
never went back to it. But yes, I mean, but by all means, no. We can absolutely go deeper.
So I started over. I'm reading it. I'm rereading it and reading what I didn't finish the first time around. And I just finished the first book, which is 6 issues. And it struck me like what a monumental hill to climb for Jeff Johns. If somebody said to you, you are going to write what is essentially book 2 of the greatest graphic novel. Let's just call it a graphic novel. Everybody else does. It was originally a 12-issue series, a maxi series. But you are going to continue the greatest graphic novel of all time. For most writers, like say they got Fabian Nicieza to do it, like the Snickers would be rampant, right? But I think there's only a limited amount of guys that could at least enter that arena without being laughed at. Neil Gaiman would be one, right? I would think Neil would do a wonderful job continuing Watchmen because he's a great writer. I'm sure he would find an angle that would make it worth reading. Do you agree with that? Right?
I could see that. I'd have to get past the idea of him even accepting that challenge.
Right.
I think he'd have too much reverence to do it. But if he did, I think he would put his mind to crafting something very original.
Right. And I couldn't think of writers who would be up to the challenge. Every name that came into my mind, I smacked it down. I didn't think they were worthy enough. And surprisingly, Jeff Johns was not a contender back then. Upon reading the first 6 issues now, I think Johns did as good a job as anyone in his position could possibly do. I still have to separate the original from this sequel because Gary Frank is a phenomenal illustrator. He's no Dave Gibbons, right? I think Frank is wonderful, and he's one of my current darlings for the Ghost Machine stuff because I think he is drawing some of the best looking comics on the stands right now. His work in Doomsday Clock is really good as well, and it's okay. Let's put it this way: it's not on a par with Dave Gibbons, but if Dave Gibbons's Watchmen lives on Smith Street, Gary Frank's Doomsday Clock is a couple of blocks away. Like he's not, parallel or across the street from Dave Gibbons. He's in the ballpark with this, which is stunning to me that you could enter into a job, a creative endeavor, let's say, trying to perpetuate what was created and regarded as the best that ever was and not fall on your face. Isn't that the best case scenario? Especially where Watchmen is concerned, to just get in there, create something of value that doesn't shame yourself, and then get out. Because I don't think these characters have been used since. Am I right, Dap?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say with 100% certainty, but no, I mean, when you come to characters like Mime or Marionette, no, because other changes have come and gone with DC since this, so...
Right, and I wasn't too concerned about how they got the playing pieces on the game board. Like there was Rebirth, and then there was the button, and they dragged Flash into it, and there was a thing with Batman, and the comedian's button was found in the Batcave, which is information that's kind of contradicted in Doomsday Clock.
Yeah. With
Dr. Manhattan saving the comedian. In Watchmen, when Ozymandias flings the comedian out of the window, he dies, but he doesn't because Dr. Manhattan saves him, transports him not only through space but time as well, right? So it's a little like it doesn't sound like it works on paper, but for the story that Jeff Johns has created, at least the first 6 issues, I wasn't put off by it. And I revere Watchmen as much as the next guy. I don't think this was I don't think it was a whiff. I guess that's ultimately what I'm trying to say. I'm stunned at just how compelling that Johns has crafted this story with Gary Frank and Brad Anderson, right? I think Mimic and Marionette are great characters, wonderful characters. I would like to see them in something else because they're brutal, they're vicious, they're bloodthirsty, and they're both a little bit insane. I want to know why Mime can make a gun, use his hand in the shape of someone who's actually holding a gun, but the gun's invisible because he's a mime, yet it fires bullets. Like, how does that work? Is that explained?
Well, it's actually,
is it explained later in the series?
I don't want to say it's explained later in the series, but you do actually see the hammer portion of the gun when they're in Joker's bar. So it does exist. It's just, I mean, we can't see it.
Right. Where's it coming from? Is it a pocket dimension? Right. Is it like where? I don't get it. And there's one panel where she's like, "Oh, you're pulling out your knives," and he's flinging these invisible knives around, but they're actually doing damage. It's insane. I think Reggie, the new Rorschach, is an equally compelling character. Like it's not milquetoast. He didn't just phone it in. There's a reason for this character. Matt, he was witness to Ozymandias's creature plopping into reality, and when the creature plopped into reality, it killed his parents. So he saw his parents die and blames Ozymandias for it, and takes on this witch hunt to bring Ozymandias down, but he ends up working with him in order to save their reality by going over into the reality to which Dr. Manhattan escapes, because they feel like Dr. Manhattan is the only thing that could save their reality. So they need him. So they come over to the DC Universe reality to get Dr. Manhattan, and then all of the characters we know and love interact with the Watchmen characters. And it doesn't stink. Is that high praise? I don't know. I don't think it stinks.
What would you say is the nutshell theme of the book? Like, what was his intent with this book, do you think, in terms of just connecting it to the original, as well as doing what the original did, which was having, some sort of commentary on comics themselves, on what was going on in the world in the mid 80s. How do you feel this book measures up just in terms of themes?
Well, in the first 6 issues, that's all I can speak on because I haven't read past that. The setup is basically a dark mirror image of Watchmen.
Okay.
The world's going to hell, not because Russia is invading Poland, as in the original, and the threat of thermonuclear war is imminent. In the DC universe, there's this metahuman controversy going on where it's been noted that an overabundance of superheroes seem to originate from the United States and reside in the United States. There are others in other countries, but there's a preponderance of superheroes. The vast majority are in the United States, and it was said that there was some kind of government program in the wake of Superman to duplicate him, in a sense, with other people. Like, characters were manipulated into scenarios where there was a quote unquote accident but through which they derived their powers, but it wasn't an accident. These things were calculated and conceived in ways where they would manipulate these people into being into these circumstances in order to see what would happen. It like with Firestorm, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's unrest in the DC universe, and Batman's being hunted. So the magnitude of what's happening on the DC side is not as dire as what was going on in the Watchmen universe, but it's still, I mean, there's still that rampant disquiet among the population something's pissing them off. In Watchmen, it's war. In the DC universe, it's this meta-human agenda. What are the themes? So far, it seems to be just a commingling of the Watchmen characters and the DC characters.
Mm-hmm.
If there is some kind of commentary on comics, I haven't been able to pick it up yet. I find the marionette and the mime intriguing in that they're characters that are manipulated by, in a sense, a puppet master, right? Mm-hmm. So that could be a subtle take on IP and perpetuating an IP. There's really nothing that leaps out at me as being especially state of the comics union or art making or not yet. Maybe towards the end. I don't know, but it's kind of like it's goofy things that make me really like this series. Like Rorschach has a fondness for pancakes, but he likes them in a very particular way, warm syrup. And Alfred Rorschach finds the Batcave, breaks into Wayne Manor, finds the Batcave very easily. And there was a plate of pancakes left on the table for Bruce, and they have aluminum foil over it, and it says, "Here's some pancakes, Alfred, blah, blah, blah. Like, eat your pancakes." And Rorschach eats them. And later on in that scenario, Bruce offers Rorschach a room while he's reading a journal, and all the while planning to dump this guy into Arkham Asylum, where he thinks he belongs. And Alfred peeks his head in, and he's like, "You need anything?" And he's like, "Do you make those pancakes?" Speaking as Rorschach would speak. And Alfred's like, "Yes, I can whip you up another batch." Like, goofy little things like that, where you have a character who's not Rorschach, but who's a placeholder for, he talks the same, he approaches conflict the same way, he has the same morals or amorals as Rorschach to a degree, and he's interacting with Alfred. Like, that just could be a fanboy geek out moment. I don't know. But I guess the whole thing I'm saying here is I was surprised that none of the creative team fell on their faces in any way. And I think that's a best case scenario when you're trying to promulgate the themes to a certain degree and the characters in the greatest graphic novel of all time. Like, you're doomed to fail, I think, on some degree when you engage in a project like this. So, hey, we want you to pick up the reins for Watchmen. Like, who in the frig could ever do that?
Well, did you watch the HBO series?
No.
Okay.
Yes, you did.
Oh, the live action one.
Yeah, not the new cartoon.
Oh, yes, I've seen the HBO, and I thought that was good too, because it spiraled out of Watchmen, but it wasn't, it was different enough where I didn't judge too harshly. But did you like it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that, and I thought that they extrapolated on a lot of things that I just had not anticipated. I would have never guessed they would have gone the route that they went. So I was just curious how this measures up to that series.
Oh, yeah, I think that series is better than Doomsday Clock.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah,
Dap?
I mean, they both. Yeah, no, they both take what. They both build on what came before. Whatever happens in the world of Watchmen, the comic book, as far as Doomsday Clock is concerned, that's pretty much kind of like where it ended. Yeah, I mean, people. There was a mental institution. There's some letters that were dated up to 1992, but pretty much after that, that's when anything beyond that, all the scenes pretty much take place in the DC universe. So, whereas the TV show is still lives off of whatever, it's still in that Watchmen universe from those 12 issues. So, they're separate. the television show was extremely well done. I absolutely adored that. I think we're going to be rewatching it again soon. But
I'd like to do that too.
It's so good in what they did and how it ended and where it can go from there if they decided to. But that's that side, that's that dimension, that universe, whatever you want to call it. The Doomsday Clock, I think, is and when Vince mentioned that he wanted to start it over and finish it, I figured why not? Because I wasn't in love with the idea, and I was reading it when it was coming out, but then issue number 10 came out, and that I think was my single issue of the year for the Oscars. That was just a phenomenon because it was all Superman. It was just the way Johns just pieced together like all the different eras of Superman and fit it within this concept, and I was just blown away. And I mean, I still remember the messages that I sent to Vince and Jason. Say I would basically like just pleading with them to read it if that was the only thing that they read that week.
No, I remember it being good, but I mean, let's be honest. There's an agenda with Doomsday Clock.
Yes.
It's let's just insert these characters back or into the DC universe. So there's a very strong layer of commerce with this thing.
Well, yeah, because I know obviously it's different when there's characters that the company has owned forever and will continue to own. But I know Watchmen is a special situation. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but similarly, the guys in Spinal Tap, every 7 years they have to do something Spinal Tap related, or else they can't use those characters anymore. The characters are actually owned by other people, and so they more or less lease these characters, and the whole concept of this is Spinal Tap. Similarly, I think with Watchmen, I do feel like you can only reprint that book so many times, and they did before Watchmen, and now they do this. Like it's clearly something to just maintain ownership. Do you know, did they say that they were going to try to incorporate these characters into the DC universe proper after this, and that just kind of fizzled?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
This, and after I think, what was it, Three Jokers? I think Johns wrote that because Fabak drew that. I think after this, Johns wasn't as involved with DC projects. He was either working on live action stuff, or he was developing his Ghost Machine universe that he took to Image. So I don't know if this was like a dream project for Johns. I don't know if it was just something that, listen, I get to work with Gary Frank again, and I'm excited for that. I still haven't read anything about Before Watchmen in any of those books. I don't know if I think part of the reason I was interested in Doomsday Clock, because I'm one of the people who were just like, listen, fucking Watchmen is a perfect comic. You don't need to touch on it, expand on it, do whatever you want to do with it. I understand why the reason people would, or publishers would, but as far as I'm concerned, as a reader, as a fan of that work, we don't need any more of it. We didn't need to adapt it into anything. It was just, that's fine. But if you want to call it an exception or whatever, for Doomsday Clock, whether it was the incorporating it into the DC universe, I did have, there was a curiosity that I had about it. But once Vince said he was going to revisit it, I dug out the deluxe edition, and there were a couple, I not that I forgot, but that I guess in my haste in reading it for the show, things maybe just didn't quite get absorbed, and there were a few things early on in the early issues
Yeah.
that I not saw for the first time, but just hit me harder or better. And it rereading it, it is in my mind more well done than I initially gave it credit for as it was when it was first coming out.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. But Matthew, there's a Johns approaches the structure of Doomsday Clock very much the same way that Moore approached Watchmen. Like there's an issue focusing on each of his new characters. Mm-hmm. There's instead of Tales from the Black Freighter, there's a Nathaniel Dusk movie marathon being shown, and scenes or sequences from the Nathaniel Dusk movie will supplant the Tales from the Black Freighter pages. And what's going on in the Nathaniel Dusk sequences plays into the bigger narrative, just like the original, right?
Okay.
So I mean, it's a more successful endeavor than I gave it credit for. Does it it does not match the original. Come on, let's be serious.
Oh, sure. Yeah. How does it rank with the there was a Tom King Rorschach series that came out after. Series. Yeah.
And funnily enough, I'm sorry, but Tom actually says that is in the same universe as the Watchmen HBO series.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
I enjoyed it, but I think I adore Gary Frank. I think the visuals in Doomsday Clock are, to my eyes, better than what's in Rorschach. Tom King's.
Yeah, I enjoy Gary Frank's work quite a bit. He's a very thoughtful artist.
Yes.
It's not just flashy rendering. I think that his panel composition and what he chooses to put on the page is pretty unique among modern mainstream artists.
He's very gifted he's incredibly subtle, especially in facial features and expressions. I see a lot of John Severin in Gary.
Yeah,
Frank.
for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I mean, because I adore Severin, naturally, I would gravitate towards Frank. But I remember enjoying the Johns and Frank's Superman stuff a lot. Mm-hmm. And but I think this is a pair that I want to see remain intact, like the great pairs of current comics like Brubaker Phillips and I would love to see this Ghost Machine stuff just keep going on and on and on, because I think when Johns and Frank get together, there's magic. And yes, there's magic in Doomsday Clock, but it's not nearly as potent of the hoodoo as Watchmen. I have to keep saying that because people are going to think, Doomsday Clock is a fitting successor to Watchmen. It's not, but nothing ever could be.
No, yeah, that's silly. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I guess once you accept the fact that DC is going to keep doing this, you either take that or leave it, and then just judge the work for what it is.
Right. I think at the end of the day, at least as far as the 6 issues go, the entire creative team did themselves proud in the fact that they did not completely fall flat on their faces. I mean, that's, I think, the best you could hope for when you're, riffing on a landmark piece of art like Watchmen. You're trying to scale Mount Everest. You know what I mean? It's an impossibility.
Well, that's how I felt with recent movie remake. Evil Dead, to me, I feel like, to me, that's an impossible task to remake Evil Dead.
Right.
Mainly because you don't have Bruce Campbell as Ash, So that's like 90% of what makes the movie great. And then you don't have the initial spark. And I think that's part of the thing with, Watchmen was an event when that was coming out. Now, sadly, a Watchmen related project comes out and it's buried among, however many hundreds of other comics come out every week. And there may be some initial excitement for it, but by the time the series is halfway done, people have moved on to something else. And it's got to be tough for a creator to take that project on knowing that it's not going to... It would be impossible to have the kind of impact that the original one did just because of the time in which it came out. There weren't like event comics. I'm not speaking on like, the traditional event, Secret Wars type thing. I mean, just like the next big comic by this big creator is coming out and everybody's talking about it. That's dissipated to a degree, I think.
Well, it doesn't help that I think the big two are in a creative slump right now.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's not a recent thing. It's like a couple years long slump.
There's a joke on the Onion about Taco Bell, and it's about some new menu item on Taco Bell. It's like we've rearranged the same 7 ingredients that's in all our other menu items, and that's essentially what Marvel and DC are doing. They're the Taco Bell of comic books. So,
but you could still rearrange those ingredients and tell good stories. And
for sure.
And there are a lot of books right now from the big two that, when it comes to telling good stories, they're falling a bit short.
Yeah, and my wife and I were just talking about getting Taco Bell tonight, so I don't mean to say that it's like no, great. I like Taco Bell like once or twice a year, but yeah. I
mean, when you have creators like Gail Simone or Al Ewing or Ryan Stegman, or I mean, just look at anybody who's working on any of the big two books right now. Any of these creators should be able to tell bang up stories any day of the week, but like the current crop of post Krakoa X-Men books, I don't think none of us are feeling it. The three of us, me, Vince, and Jason, we're not feeling that.
No.
Vince recently finally read a decent Spidey book, and that's only because it's a tie-in to something else going on. It's not even in like Peter's main book. It's unfortunate that I don't know if they're just treading water. I don't know if it's editorial. I don't know what's going on, but I want to be able to open up a book from the publishers that brought me into this medium and read a fun and entertaining story, and I can't.
I think there's a different instigating factor for the making of comics these days. Back when we got into the medium, comics were made solely to make comics. There were no movies. There were no TV shows.
Right.
There were no trade paperbacks or collections.
Although Stan had been pushing for that since the 70s, he wanted that to happen. It was a matter of it couldn't, but they were vying for that for sure.
And Jason likes to groan when I say shit like this, but even the inventory stories of 30 years ago are more interesting to me than the current stuff going on today. Like the stuff that they had in a drawer for an eventuality. Somebody got sick or somebody, whatever the case, where they couldn't do a regular issue of an ongoing book. They swapped in a story they had in the can. And those things done by those creators are far more interesting to me than the things that we see on a every Wednesday. Now that could be a product of me being old, right? Because everything was better when we were younger. That's just the way it is. Is that true? Not necessarily, but it is for the person that lived through those bygone days, right? Fantastic Four was way better in the 60s and 70s than it is now, without question. Was it though? It depends on your perspective, right? And I think that's what it all comes down to, perspective. Like, I don't have the necessary perspective to enjoy this current stuff. For the most part. Yeah, there are things that pop up that it's like, hey, that wasn't so bad. But writ large, I just like it doesn't resonate with me on any level. And that's I agree. That's a me thing. That's not necessarily them. They're not making books for me.
Sure, but there's also the element of just history in general where you can only do something for the first time once. And you look at, I just got the artist edition of Batman Year One. How many times have they read that concept once that book hit, and then it's like, okay, we're going to go back and tell the origin of all these characters. It's like it's been done over and over and over again. But at the time, I was buying those issues off the rack at the grocery store, and it was so exciting to see somebody, and then not only that, but then to have an artist like Mazzucchelli who just was so inventive in what he was doing on those pages. You just can't do that 40 years later. It just, you can't tell a future Batman story and have it be exciting the way Dark Knight Returns was, because it's like a firework in the sky. It goes off, and then you see another like 20 fireworks, and it's not the same as that first one that you saw. It's just impossible.
I agree. Yeah. This is a silly question, but how is that artist edition?
It's I'm a huge fan of all the artist editions, and this one in particular is eye-opening. Not that there were things you didn't. I think anybody who's read that book understands the genius of it. But I had just read part of Mazzucchelli's interview in the Comics Journal. I think it's issue 194. And God, he was so smart. Is so smart. Just a person who, his inventiveness, his way of looking at making comics is not equaled by anybody, because he just, I think the only other person that maybe from that era that was thinking on that level is Sienkiewicz, where they weren't just trying to be comic book artists. They were incorporating graphic design. They were incorporating fine art, painting, and the eye of a photographer. Like, there's all this stuff happening in that book and when you see it full size and you see the original page and you see everything that you see in an artist edition, I'm consider myself very lucky that I live in a time where you can have this. It's fantastic.
Do you have the Born Again artist edition?
I do, yeah.
Because I thought I was done with artist editions after the Gil Kane Amazing and the Born Again. But knowing that the Batman Year One does exist, I am extremely tempted. Not something I need, but as far as an artist edition goes, and knowing what that story and those creators mean to me, it is something that I am seriously looking for reasons to justify getting it.
As a fan of inking alone, it's priceless for just being able to see what he did. And it's not so much like it's under rendered in ways that is hard for someone like myself who's constantly just noodling to step back and go, God damn, he just like slapped these lines down for these stairs. There's nothing here. There's barely a drawing, but when you read it on the printed page, you're like, oh no, that makes total sense. And then you wonder, like, did he reference this stuff? Was he in an actual building? And then he like squinted. It's almost like you're squinting, looking at a photograph and just taking the bare minimum of elements that you need to make a picture. But it just works perfectly. It's incredible.
It's amazing that when those issues were coming out, we realized that there was something special going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think the magnitude of what Mazzucchelli, and we got to give credit to Frank too, of course.
Oh, sure.
But the magnitude of what Mazzucchelli was doing was essentially creating something like the old masters. This was work he did. I don't know if he knew it at the time, or if he was just approaching the art the only way he knew how. But as you said, so smart and so comprehensive in his approach to image making that he has created work that essentially pierced the veil of time. Like, we're still talking about this book how many decades after the fact. It's still reverberating through time as being one of the all-time best examples of what sequential art can be.
Yes, and
that's insane.
It is, and I think, I mean, you could take that same story, and I'm going to throw out a name that I used last time I was on here, and I got in trouble for it by someone who's a fan of this person, but believe me, I have respect for this person. If Jim Aparo drew this book, you'd be like, yeah, all right. You know, it would be okay as a story.
Yeah.
But
it wouldn't be a landmark. It wouldn't.
No.
It won't be a milestone.
I feel the very same way about Jim Aparo.
I still love you both, but it's
no,
and listen, no, there's no denying it. I mean, if Neil Adams drew Batman and the Outsiders #1, it would be you wouldn't be able to keep it on the back wall at comic shops because people would be buying it. It was a Jim Aparo drawn comic book. I absolutely get where Jim ranks when it comes to folks like George Tuska or Don Heck or Frank Robbins.
Don't throw Frank Robbins in there.
Listen.
Well, I would. Oh my God! Can you imagine year one drawn by Frank Robbins? Oh
yes, I can.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so I think he's more in line with Mazzucchelli. But so let me ask this question: like, if Neil Adams drew Batman year one, do you think it would have the same impact?
No. Because like Grant Morrison, Neil Adams cannot separate himself from the art. He has to do that nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Oh, look at me, I'm Neil Adams. The same way Grant Morrison can't resist inserting his personality. I mean, as a writer, it's inevitable that your personality is going to come through in the work. You can't read a Stephen King book and not know it's a Stephen King book, right? Mm-hmm. There are certain Stephen King-isms that are present in the work that alert you to the fact that you're reading a book by Stephen King. Same thing with Grant Morrison. But I think Morrison is, like Aleister Crowley, is so captivated by himself that comes through in the work, right?
I also don't know how tumultuous that collaboration would be, because you have somebody like Frank and Neil, and I don't know where, like, at least with Hard Traveling Heroes, Denny O'Neil was telling a story, but at least he knew that Neil was going to draw that story, and they worked well together. I don't know if Frank Miller and Neil Adams could have that same turn. I don't know. And again, with when you have Mazzucchelli working with Miller, Miller's writing the words, he's telling him what the story is going to be about, and yeah, we need Mazzucchelli to tell that story, to visualize it, but I don't know what kind of impasse there would be with those two creators.
I think Neil Adams was the absolute perfect artist for Hard Traveling Heroes, because
I agree with you.
Adams injected a sense of realism into comics that prior to him, at least in mainstream DC comics, was not present. And if you look at the themes of Hard Traveling Heroes, it's all stuff that's ripped from the headlines of the day. Drug abuse. Mm-hmm. I mean, just go down the list. So for them to pair an artist who was of a far more realistic bent than their average artist, that was a magical pairing, because the realism was in the details of the stories. The corruption, the drug use, all of that stuff was seen outside everybody's window. It was real. So you got a super realist like Neil Adams. That's a great pairing, right? But where were we? I've lost track of it. You guys, you said something.
We're just talking about the idea of, I think not to say that you have to perfectly delineate who gets credit for what, but just the idea of, you take the exact same story. I have a friend named Dave Baker, and he's put out these 2 books called Shitty Watchmen and Shitty Dark Knight.
I have those. Yeah.
Yeah, and the concept there was like, do these books work if the drawings aren't good? And I would think you can argue that some of the drawings in Dark Knight are shitty to begin with, and I say that with love.
Back up,
please don't. Those are the pages that were partially inked by McFarlane. But I think one of the things that Miller isn't really credited with, he's almost like an editor / writer, because he had this period where, he works with Sienkiewicz, he's working with Mazzucchelli, he works with Jeff Darrow, he is finding talent that's fairly young and fresh that he's working with or is a contemporary, and just letting them have free reign and say, you guys do what you do, bring it back to me, I'll figure out. It's almost like, traditional Marvel style, but with the sense of, with Frank Miller being someone who was so deeply in love with comic book art and loved like European artists and Japanese artists, and he was finding contemporaries in the United States that were doing that kind of work and catering to them. I don't think he could work with a Neil Adams because he was too much of a veteran at that point. I don't think he's a pushover, and I don't think these other guys were pushovers necessarily, but they were more open to Miller's concepts than I think Neil Adams would be. There'd be too much butting heads. Yes. Like, hey, let me tell you, that's not how we do comics around here. Whereas Sienkiewicz is like, I don't give a fuck how comics used to be done. I used to be like Neil Adams, and now I'm doing whatever I want. And it's so freeing. Like, you don't have to make comics that way. Neil Adams' big thing was like, well, I want the coloring to look really good. And it's like, well, okay, that's great. But there's more to it than that, than slick coloring.
Right. Adams isn't necessarily a collaborator.
No.
He's a maverick. Where Sienkiewicz and Mazzucchelli were very eager to become part of that magic multi-headed beast that comes when you collaborate, or that springs to life when you collaborate with someone.
Yeah.
And you have to give at times you have to give deference to somebody whose ideas may be better than yours. And I don't think Neil Adams was willing to admit that there were ideas better than his. Right.
Yeah. And that's where I think Frank Miller, if you want to call him an editor on these books, it was able to, work with these other artists and the colorists as well. I mean, Richmond Lewis and Lynn Varley, these people were making these books look way different than anybody else. That's one of the things Mazzucchelli mentions in this Comics Journal interview, is that he had Richmond Lewis color one of the Denny O'Neil issues of Daredevil that he had done. And Jim Shooter apparently saw it and was going around showing people, like, this is what comics should look like. Because everybody was just stuck in this mode of like, okay, this is how we color, these are the choices. And it wasn't like he had special colors that they were choosing, and Richmond Lewis was, somehow pulling out colors that nobody else was using. It was the same color palette, but done in a very fresh way, because the mindset was just, okay, every issue's got to look exactly the same. That's why that when Born Again comes out and Year One comes out, it was like glowing in the rack compared to the other comics that were there. It was like radioactive.
Yeah. Yep. And I think there was a bit of, there was a component of danger with those books too, because they were so unpredictable, especially books like Elektra Assassin and Ronin and, of course, Dark Knight Returns. Like, you did not know what to expect from issue to issue. And that was wonderful. When have we felt that since?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Seriously. Alan Moore's Swamp Thing was like that. You just didn't know where he was going to take that book. Some of the Epic series back in the day, like
Martial Law,
Boz Chronicles, like they were strange and they didn't walk or talk like other comics. Void Indigo. Well, what we did get from Void Indigo.
Yeah.
But no, it was just, that was a very fertile time in comics that, in hindsight, I really doubt we'll ever see that again. The black and white boom was exploding. Everybody, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but everybody was trying stuff. They were throwing stuff against the wall to see what stuck. The majority of it didn't, but there was real honest creativity going on. It was inspired by money, yeah, okay, sure, but there was a willingness to explore, where now that's almost a death sentence with the mainstream books. Like anything that doesn't play by the rules is not embraced by the readership, and that's a comics should be dangerous as well as ridiculous. They should really. And now we see that in the indie arena, where there's comics coming out now that are just so odd and strange, but they're not coming from the big two.
I just saw, and I can't remember the name of it, and I should, because I'm about to say how impactful it was, but it's a Josh Baer edited comic that's all riffs on Popeye, and yes. I was watching this YouTube video about it, and I was shocked. Like, I haven't been shocked by comics in a long time, but it was like the first time I would see, Zapped or something. And I just thought, man, I need to like get out and like buy some indie comics. Like, I'm not paying attention to what anybody else is doing, and I'm looking at these pages. I'm like, this is really cool stuff. And every now and then we have this excellent independent comic shop called Howling Pages. It's like a 15-minute drive from my house. And I go through there and I flip through stuff. I'm like, God, people are putting out really interesting work. I think that you have a generation that has zero interest in working for the big two. So all of the interesting artists are just doing their own thing because they have more opportunity to do that. You can run a Kickstarter or just, self-publish it and put it up on your website or whatever, or you're not worried about distribution anymore. So nobody feels like, I have to go to a big publisher to do work. Nobody's thinking, I've got to move to New York so that I can get a job in the DC offices. I'm just going to make what I want to make and put it out. And that's what I'm doing. I have like 2,000 people who buy my work, and I sustain myself off of that. I have zero desire to try to get in at DC or Marvel because I don't need to. Not that I'm not saying that like, that stuff is garbage. It's not. I'm just saying like, that's not my mindset. And I think a lot of people have that same mindset now. So you're not seeing, somebody who's like Mark Badger or Tony Salmons getting jobs at Marvel and DC because they're off doing some weird stuff themselves that they're selling at cons and selling on their big cartel store.
Right. One of the best books in recent memory is Ken Landgraf's, the New York City, what is it? New York City Outlaws. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's wonderful. And it comes from a place entirely alien from the mainstream. Like it just would not work in that arena. But Josh is a special dude because I think a lot of Josh's, I don't even know what to call the word, but Josh is not wired like most people. And I think that's an asset in that he is so entirely consumed with making images. I mean, if you follow him on Instagram, he's always putting up process videos, not only of his own work, but the work that comes out of his teaching gigs. And this is a guy that genuinely, Josh is not a rich man, right? I doubt that Josh would ever be, financially well off, but he doesn't give a shit. He exists to make images, and that's rare. Like even the best or the most visible indie artists, I think, do it like Simon Hanselman. Mm-hmm. Simon Hanselman makes comics that a lot of people like, But Simon Hanselman knows that if he wipes his ass on a piece of paper, he could turn around and sell that. Right? He knows that there's a financial aspect to his work. So he keeps creating. I'm not saying that's the only reason why Hanselman creates, but it's a component of it. I mean, the guy's got a kid, he's got a wife, he's got to eat. He knows that he's got a very good deal with Fantagraphics, and he makes these zines, and he makes money on those, and then the zines in turn become the collections that he publishes through Fantagraphics. Like he's got it in essence, it's a money machine, right? Bayer doesn't have that. Bayer will embark on a project. He's got this project now. The comic is called Josh. And everyone involved in the making of, it's an anthology. Everyone involved in the making of this comic is named Josh. So Josh Simmons is in it, Josh Bayer. Like there's a bunch of Joshes. The book is called Josh. Financially, that's like, who is that going to reach? Not a whole lot of people, but he's doing it. I mean, maybe with Josh Simmons involved, there'll be a higher visibility to it. But in a sense, he's just making this book because it's a cool concept. It's neat. He gets to do what he loves to do. And then when the project is over, Josh is the kind of person that will just pick up the pencil and start doing something else. Like that's a rarity in this industry. He's doomed himself to a life of trying to keep making what he's making. Like Josh could work at, I don't know, Starbucks and probably make more than what he's making on his comics, but he doesn't want to do that because it would stop him from doing comics. Like I said, he's a rarity, and I love every breath this guy takes. As you, Matthew, I'm not playing favorites here, but you have the same drive that Josh does. Like you just want to make comics. You want to decipher that mental image and turn it into something in 2D space that you're not so. You don't want to please an audience. You want to please yourself.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that the freedom that you get from doing it that way is it balances out the lack of money that you're going to make. And when I say lack of money, like I said, I make enough money to sustain myself, and I do commissions and stuff as well. And that's actually where most of my income comes from. I don't even know if I would necessarily even call myself an active comic book maker, since I actually put out comics so infrequently. But, to be in this position to say, okay, this is what I'm going to get up and do every morning is sit down and work on a new page and find some new way of drawing, an established character or whatever the case may be. Like, if you have the right mindset to just be grateful for that's what you get to do, it just opens you up, and hopefully the people that respond to that get some of that from the work. I think when you read something that Josh puts out, it's liberating because it doesn't feel like a corporate product. It feels like you're holding a piece of art.
Right.
Because you are.
Yes. But I think both you and Josh have achieved the magic formula. Yeah, I mean, you're not getting rich on this stuff, but you're also not getting up every morning dreading going to a 9 to 5. I mean, speaking entirely from experience, there's nothing worse than the realization that you are living another day to go to the place at which you don't want to be, doing stuff that you don't want to do. It's kind of horrible. It really is. As a creative person, you want the freedom to express yourself in ways that you deem necessary. Like you should be charting your own course, but a lot of us don't do that because we're driven by money. Like if you don't make this amount of money each year, well, then, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, what are you doing? You're not motivated. But there's different kinds of motivation. If you're motivated by money, I think that opens a door to a soulless existence of sorts, especially if you're doing something that you really don't want to do. Where you and Josh, you make stuff that you want to make for people that want to buy it. Like that, you've cracked the code, and I envy that.
I didn't do it for so long, and when I was in that in-between period where I was making comics, but it wasn't generating enough money for me to quit my day job, it just made the day job that much worse. And I remember being at work one day and a person came in to ask me a simple question about getting a job done. And I was frustrated. The roof was leaking and I was pulling paper out of a jam in this giant piece of Xerox equipment. And she's talking to me and I slammed my head against the door of the Xerox equipment and I kicked this bucket of water and I went outside and I started smashing wooden pallets against the side of the building. And so I went for a walk around the block a couple times and I come in, I'm all sweaty and splinters all in my hands. And then I get a call from my boss. He's like, "Can you come in my office for a second?" And I go sit down. He's like, "What's going on with you? Why does this keep happening?" Because this wasn't an isolated incident. And I just said, "I'm not supposed to be here." I said, "This is not what I'm supposed to be doing." Because at the time, when that happened, I was like 43, I think, 44. I was just like, this is not what my life was supposed to be. And he didn't, disagree. Like, he's just like, "Yeah, you got to figure a way to get out of this." And fortunately I was able to, but it was rough going there for a long time.
Yeah, that was the moment. Yeah.
Yep.
There's a component of bravery that one needs to have to embark on the unknown, and you have it. You had it. Yeah, it's taking that step. It's rough, because there's so many unknowns. Am I going to be able to contribute to my family's?
Oh, sure.
But I think, and I'm one of those do as I say, don't as I do, don't do as I do people. Because I tell my kids, you're young enough to take risks, right? Mm-hmm. Do it. Step out into the void. The unknown is where you want to be because you're going to learn from your experiences. It's going to shape you into a more versatile, more able, whatever. Like in my son's case, he wants to be a photographer, and now he's taking basic because he's in a photography major. He has to take art classes, so he's in basic drawing, and he's never been able to really express himself with mark making. Like
sure.
My daughter Mia just took to it. It was a natural thing. She didn't need to be shown how to see or be, the tips and tricks that we all do when we draw. He didn't understand any of that. And he's in a drawing class now where he's struggling. He's like, "Dad, I'm in this thing and I don't know what to do." She put a still life out and she told us to draw it and I didn't even know where to start. And I said, "You're in a place right now that is the best possible place for you because you are going to absorb, you're going to fail, not the class, but you're going to fail at your first, your third, your fifth, your seventh attempt. They're not going to look good, but they will. There will be a point where they will start looking good. And you cannot delete the time you spend failing because that's very important. Failure is what makes you better or more able to do or express yourself the way you want to. So you need these failures." And he's like, "I never looked at it like that." But that's the way it is. You need to be smacked down. You need to realize that you can't do it. Why can't you do it? That's what you need to find out. Why can't you do it? And once you unravel, once you pull the wrapper off that candy, right? You may not get to the chewy center soon, but keep sucking on it. This is a shitty metaphor, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you got to step outside of the individual projects because I know that the little bit of time I spent in art school, every project to me felt like the thing. Like, if this doesn't go gangbusters, and if I don't, nail this, then I must be a failure as an artist. Not understanding, like, the whole point of this is just to learn.
Right.
Like, this isn't whatever critique you get off of this individual piece right now isn't about defining you as an artist. It's to get you to be an artist. I think, young people a lot of times just assume it's hard to think beyond where you're at currently, and you don't think what I'm learning right now may not pay off for another week. It may not pay off for another 20 years. There's things I learned in art school that I just now recently put together, like, oh yeah, I haven't had to do that since I learned it, 30 years ago, but now it makes sense. So, that's one thing I would tell young people who are starting out is, like, first off, you need to reduce the stakes. You think that there's high stakes with this stuff, and yes, you want to get a good grade, you want to graduate, but the only stakes is just learning and then applying that to the next thing that you do. That's all you need to worry about.
Yeah, failure is crucial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you need to fail.
And it's hard because there are kids that do really, really well.
Right.
You're always going to see kids that
yes.
just everything is stellar that they do, and you assume that you're being graded according to what they're doing. It's very hard not to compare yourself to other people.
Yeah. Well, I tried to impart the notion that drawing is not based on realism. Mm-hmm. Even your best drawing is an approximation of something that you're seeing. You are translating this thing into from a three-dimensional space to a two-dimensional space, and you're trying to capture. It sounds hoity-toity, but you're trying to capture the essence of what this thing is in a way that you're happy with. Right. Mm-hmm. And yeah, most people can draw better than he. And he's stymied by that. He's like, there's people coming in and they're drawing and it looks great. It looks just like the thing. And I'm like, I told him, I said, producing a drawing that looks just like the subject is not the goal. It is the farthest thing from the goal. The goal is to translate the thing in a way that is filtered through your personality, the way you make marks. Like, he doesn't get it right now, but he will. And I feel bad for him because he's struggling. But that's a necessary part of growing as a creative person. You need to struggle. And I mean, I'm sure he'll get it. But right now he's coming home every day from school. Like, he's not saying much. And it's like,
sure.
And I hate to see it, but on the flip side, I love to see it because it shows me that he's invested in it. He wants to do better. He wants to be able to translate things into marks and lines and blotches and, so yeah, I mean, as a parent, it hurts a little bit, but as an artist, like, this is what you need to burn off all this shit before you can, come out of the fire a full-blown creative person that's able to be confident and just grab every job, I don't want to call it a job, but every instance by the neck and just like, I'm going to beat this down and I'm going to make it my own. That's what you need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's rough. And I'm again, do as I say, don't do as I do, because I'm still motivated by money. I have a semi-lucrative job that is not what I want to do. And I just stay there because it keeps making me money. And that sucks.
Wow.
It sucks. But whatever. I get to talk about comics with my friends once a week. So that's my salvation. Yeah. Let's talk about something else.
Well, I think, I mean, just to put closure on the opening topic, I think whereas the original Watchmen is its own thing, exists in that universe, pretty much all set in that present day period. If there's a detriment to Doomsday Clock, it's that it is still it's still of that era of DC when it was published. John Kent is Clark and Lois's son. Perry White is his godfather. The Court of Owls is a thing.
Yeah.
Anything going on? There was something else that was pretty prevalent of that time, but there are certain rogues or certain characters, basically. So it's not as evergreen as the original Watchmen or even Born Again or anything like that. So there's still in continuity things going on within this maxi series. So it's not just its own standalone thing that you could consider a sequel of Watchmen. It's still very much tied into the DC universe. So so if you want to ignore everything that ever came out of Watchmen and just focus on those 12 issues by Alan and Dave, you're well within your rights to, but it's absolutely fine. Doesn't mean Doomsday Clock isn't an entertaining story, but you're not getting it in a capsule, in a bubble like you are the original story.
Yeah. And there's a lot of fan service in it. Like
Yeah.
Batman in the Owl Ship, how many people have dreamed of that sequence?
Yeah.
Right? But Matthew, you mentioned something about Watchmen being in print, the original. I remember reading somewhere that if DC ever allows Watchmen to go out of print, the rights revert back to Alan Moore.
I think
Alan
that's
Davis,
somewhere in
yeah.
the contract.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Which was the whole. I mean, that was the whole point of it. Is that he wrote it knowing that they were going to get it at the end of the 12 issues, because trades weren't a thing, and nobody saw that really coming. And but that's the O. Henry moment, or the monkey's paw. It's like, the DC just hasn't stopped printing it, so it's never going back to Alan and Dave.
Right. That's why you will see an overabundance of versions of Watchmen. Like they just published that little compact version of
that's
book.
right. Yeah,
It'll always be
the
in print.
annotated.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm eventually we'll get an artist edition, I'm sure, if Dave can dig out his artwork.
Yeah.
Oh, there is one. Yeah, it's an artisan where it's
like the graffiti type edition.
Artifact. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's crazy about that is in the back, it has a price list of when he gave all that artwork to his rep at the time to sell off. And I think the series hadn't even finished yet, and they started selling these pages off. Less than $100 a page.
Oh my God, no!
It's sickening. Yeah.
Oh, good God, no!
Yeah.
It hurts.
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting thing, because I had just been talking to someone about this the other day about the impact of those two books in particular, Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen, and this person was saying that those books launching the concept of the trade paperback and then the hardcover edition, that was a huge sea change in comics. That just, again, nobody could have foreseen that. Nobody could have predicted that was what was going to happen.
Right. Again, it was odd, strange, dangerous times, and man, I wish we can have that again. Yeah. Yep. So, Matt, what have you been reading lately that has been blowing your world up?
I just got the new Dave Cooper book, Doghead Comics, #1.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. From a company called Manson Press, which I'm not familiar with, but it's a really nice package. It's a flip book. Did either of you guys get this?
No.
I haven't read it yet.
Okay. Are you fans of Dave Cooper?
Oh, I love Dave Cooper. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Sweaty. Sweaty's my thing. I love the sweaty.
Yeah. So it says in here, this is part 1 of 6. I'm going to go out on a limb and say we're not getting all 6 issues of this, just because the man makes too much money selling paintings, and it took 20 years, 25 years for this to come out. But it's gorgeous. It's a gorgeous package. I have some issues with the writing. He does a lot of showing something in the panel and then having a caption or having the characters say what's happening in the panel, which can be very frustrating because the artwork is so great. And it's like, I can clearly tell what's happening in this panel. You don't need a caption box that is also explaining what's happening. So I wish he had resisted doing that, but he uses a very interesting technique for one of the stories where he does red ink for the figure work, and then all the backgrounds are done in graphite. And it's something new for him, I think, and I've never seen anybody else do it, but it's very impactful, and of course his cartooning is fantastic. And I honestly just didn't think we would see more comics from him. I remember he did an interview with the Comics Journal right after he finished Weasel, and he said he was going to take a break to do painting. And again, I think that was at least 20 years ago. So,
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cooper's one of those guys that fascinates me, especially when you look at his origins, like at Aircell and the stuff he was doing, which was completely fan-ish kind of stuff,
Sure.
where, big guns and big boobs and in that zone or of that genre. And then all of a sudden the stuff changed where it was sweaty and dirty. And the one that I always go back to is it Ripple? The one about Tina, the artist model?
Yeah, that's originally published in Weasel, but I think that story's called Ripple, yeah.
Right. And where it was just his obsession with this not entirely attractive Zaftig woman, and he was consumed with her, but the renderings were so, they pushed. It's with Cooper. It's kind of weird to put this into words, but they were strange and odd and unsettling and sweaty and disturbing. Everything that was unlike the stuff that I saw him coming up with, and I was like, "Holy shit! Like this is a major transformation from what I knew to like this artist has grown." But do I like the thing into which he's grown? Like this is it's the thing where I like being disturbed. I like to be pushed into areas where I'm like, where the fuck am I? This is really strange. And Dave Cooper's one of those guys that will do that to me.
Absolutely, yeah. I just snagged one of the copies of Weasel out of my short box here, and just over-rendered, but not distractingly so. Like, he's very good about character placement, shadow placement. Clearly this hatching technique that he's using is something that he can probably do in his sleep. There's a Will Elder aspect to it, like the way he does cheeks and eyes.
Yep.
Obviously Robert Crumb in there. And the thing I always think of with Dave Cooper is the scene in the Crumb documentary where they're at the comic book store and somebody hands Robert Crumb a copy of Cooper's Puke and Explode. And you could tell Robert Crumb's like, oh, is this what it's come to? Is this what I inspired? And I think Dave Cooper talks about it in that older Comics Journal interview. Like, that was a little cringe-inducing to have his comics singled out that way. But I mean, honestly, like, this stuff, I would rather look at this than some of Crumb's recent output, like that Genesis book.
Yeah.
Just because it's more inventive, just in the panel composition, whereas that book was pretty just basic illustrative work.
Yeah, I definitely think that Crumb was far more compelling to me when the work was dangerous, when he was obsessing over the big booty girls and the misogyny aspect of his work, and it's prevalent. He doesn't hide it, you know. And that I see a lot of that in Cooper too, especially with Ripple, where he's just fantasizing over this girl, and
well, and he has moments like that in this Doghead. Like it's a strange thing because, you know, a lot of artists get called out for objectifying women, and Crumb especially, and Cooper does it to an equal degree, and I don't, as far as I know, nobody's ever like actively given him a problem, you know, regarding that. But
see, I take issue with these people that are just like, oh, Crumb is so misogynistic, and he reduces women to you know, he sucks the humanity out of women. It's like, you know, where would you rather see this guy do it in real life, or would you rather see him work it out on paper? Like if he has this, let's just call it a problem or this obsession, and he's not purging it, but he's dealing with it in a creative way where, yes, it does objectify imaginary women. Like no women are being hurt in a Crumb comic. It's the idea of women that are taking dings, but that's not a real thing, right? It's not a flesh and blood organism that has, okay, you can read his work and feel some kind of way, but there's no direct transgression in Crumb's work, right? He's not hurting anyone real. He's not, you know what I'm trying to say? Like it's hard. There's a separation between fantasy and reality, and it's all fantasy based. Like, I think the misogyny in Crumb's work is the least of his transgressions. Like, he has done some comics about people of color that are really, I mean, I would think that he would want to have erased them from reality because they're really bad. And I know they're done satirically, but they still perpetuate these racial slurs against a certain group of people that it's not pleasant to read.
No, and in fact, you know, his work, he has two stories in particular that were completely misinterpreted by I can't remember if it was the KKK or some sort of,
right,
you know, alt-right white supremacist group, took them literally and used them in their own propaganda. And he had to contend with that and dealt with it however he dealt with it. Similarly, I think the thing that you say this a lot is the idea of like, well, no actual person was harmed. And I don't think anybody on the other side of it is thinking that. I think what the concept is that it would normalize that behavior for somebody who is maybe on the edge of potentially doing that in real life. So you're seeing it on the page, regardless if it's, you know, actors acting it out in front of cameras or it's somebody, you know, drawing images on a page, and it sends a signal to your brain of like, okay, that's normal to do that. That I think is the bigger worry, is the representation of that behavior maybe triggering somebody who is on the edge. And in the Crumb documentary, they talk about his brother, who was also an artist, but not on Crumb's level, who was like being arrested for pulling women's pants down in the grocery store. So, you know, there was somebody who like who had a similar outlet, but he was going over the line. And right. I think some people would argue that Crumb did, like when he would be at an art gallery and he'd jump on some woman's back. Now, hopefully he went and asked that woman, is this okay if I jump on your back? You would assume. But I think people see that and they're like, okay, well, there he is in real life riding a woman around like a horse. So I think that becomes problematic for him too, and his, you know, argument on the other side of things.
Well, I think one of the problems, and it's not something that Crumb can control, was that the perception of the work was taken in the wrong vein. They weren't in on the joke. They took it literally. And that is a failure of the person that's perceiving the work. Like, I don't see how you could read those stories and not be like, well, this guy's he's just it's a goof. He's not, there's no way that he could be entirely, honest, and like, this is not what he's saying. He's obviously saying that there are people that do believe this, but I don't, but it's a pastiche on these people where, I mean, how could you take those literally? They're so over the line that it's just like,
I mean, I think we've learned over the last 8 years that there are people who, their perception of reality and how they, take in information differs from other people. I think that, I can't remember the term for it, but comics work on like 3 different levels. So you've got, if you're flipping through a comic, you're just seeing the images and you're getting one layer. And then if you just read the words, you get a different layer. And then if you take in the words and pictures in conjunction with each other, there's your third layer. So you could get somebody who could just flip through one of those Crumb comics and be like, oh man, this guy's got some great thoughts on race relations without reading deeper than that and understanding it on a deeper level. And unfortunately, I think like that's half the population that it's going to read it like that. And even Art Spiegelman has talked about how comics are dangerous in that regard because the imagery is so powerful and it just makes, drills into your brain immediately. That's why, we use cartoons as signage. Where do you go to get, go to the bathroom? Like we put very simplistic symbols up all over our environment to tell us where to go and what to do. And so cartoons work on a very visceral, primal level.
Yeah.
So I think that if you're taking somebody who's maybe thinking on a primal level, they're gonna only go to that one layer, really. And I guess that's the question: is as you as an artist, should you be responsible for that? You as a reader who does get all 3 levels, are you responsible for that? All you can really do is just discuss it and make it an open dialogue to where it's not just a product that you're consuming, you're actually dissecting it.
But I think the very title of the piece, in which Crumb uses the N-word, that should be a clear indication that what you're about to experience is not a literal examination of Crumb's feelings. He's using hot button words to incense you. And that should be a red flag that, like, okay, whatever follows, I have to interpret this on a level that may not be the truth. It may be parody, it may be satire, it may be taking a certain mindset and showing it as it is, but for the sake of showing it as not the right way or the right manner to interact with people, right? But these people, like to your point, these people saw it and it's like, this guy knows the score. He knows how, but that's not. Again, it's in the translation.
I would be willing to bet if you took one of those comics, just the splash page of that comic into your class, and you have kids who are unfamiliar with who Robert Crumb even is, and you put that up on the screen,
I'd be in trouble.
You get gasps. You get fired. Like even if you try to explain it after the fact, like without the context of where that story was originally published, who Robert Crumb is, what his beliefs are, all that stuff, like just on a singular level, it is shocking. The surface of it is one thing. And if without the context and without the deeper reading of it, it does speak, holy shit, what is this?
Right. And I think that's why it was incredibly either brave and or foolhardy on Crumb's part to unleash that into the world. Because as I always tell my students, you can't be there to provide context to the viewer. No. You're never going to be whispering in their ear like, this is not how I feel. This is a parody of a certain mindset that I want to show. I want to crack open, the ribcage and show you how these people work. You can't do that. And so when you take away the context and you let this thing out into the world, that's where the danger arises. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, brave and or incredibly foolhardy. Like, how did he expect this thing to go over? For David, there's one on black people and there's one on Jews. Both of which are incredibly hard. I laugh because it's uncomfortable.
Sure.
They're incredibly, just bad. Mm-hmm. But there's another artist of the same stripe. I don't know. I'm sure you're both familiar with him. Barry Blair.
Yep.
Oh yeah, we've talked about Barry.
Yeah, who did a lot of books for Aircel. One of the big sellers was Elf Lord, and Barry had a penchant for preteen boys, and he would draw a lot of his characters with these little loincloths with bulges in them. Like he would but he would accentuate the bulge in the pant, in the loincloth of these little boys. And you see it in every one of his works. Leather and lace. I like the way the guy draws, so I have the majority of his output. I think he was an incredibly talented illustrator, somewhat, but he had this obsession with these underage boys and rendering them and sexualizing them, and it's incredibly cringe-inducing. But I've retained them. I keep them because it's like an example of how one artist's obsessions can creep into a work where they really don't belong. Like he would make these stories. The protagonists of his stories were always these young boys, and again, he would draw them in the manner by which he had always done. And you look at them and it's like, holy shit! Like this guy had something working on him. And so,
and when I reminded you that he molested Dave Cooper,
right?
Yeah.
So the reality of the situation, or the reality of this man's life, trickled into the work, and it's there, but it's a component of like these fantasy stories. They're just fantasy adventures where they're not unlike Lord of the Rings, but instead of Frodo and Samwise running around with the Hobbit shit on, they got these little loincloths with these huge bulges in them. And it's like, that is fascinating to me. Where one man's obsession can become so strong that it just permeates every aspect of their life, their art, their relations in the real world. And like, what happened, right? Where he did that to Dave Cooper, just to bring it all back home. But how did someone not see that? Like, how could you look at his work prior to the incident and not say like, oh, this guy's pretty good? It's like, no, there's little dudes running around with hard-ons, and like, how is this okay? Like, how did this stuff get published? Who greenlit this shit? Like, it's just fascinating. It's an ugly moment, but I embrace those things. I embrace the ugly and the squeamish and the difficult to deal with. Like that to me is a, and it's one thing to be removed from the situation. I'm not Dave Cooper, so obviously I think Dave Cooper has a totally different interpretation of Barry Blair than I do. Like, I'm fascinated by the debauchery and the obsession and the demeaning and the misogyny and all that stuff. But Dave Cooper, I think, would be like, fuck that guy. You know what I mean?
Oh, I mean, I'm not sure if Ripple, I don't know if he's talked about it being autobiographical, but it sure seems there's elements of that in there.
Right,
and it's a similar thing. And so it's like, well, it's just recycling itself in this person's life, and is that what he's examining in this book? I don't know.
I really enjoy things that have a component, an extra component, than just the graphic. Crumb, Barry Blair, like there's an element in the work that elevates it beyond mere comic books. Like it's an examination of the person that made them. You look at Dave Sim stuff. Early Cerebus is what it is. But then there's a point where his obsessions just totally consumed him, and he took this 300 issue, multi-decade life's work into a place that it just didn't fit in with the bulk of the work he had created to date, because his obsessions were so strong, and he started ranting about God and women and all of this stuff, and it totally tanked this endeavor. But it's fascinating to witness. It really is. It's not an enjoyable read, but it's captivating in a sense that this man thought so highly of his opinions on all this stuff that he took this creation that he had invested all of his creativity and time and money into, and he totally sunk it because his opinions on this stuff were worth more to him than his artistic legacy. I need to see that. I need to experience that. It's a train wreck. It's a car crash. Like, who doesn't stop or slow down when they see, potentially upset? It's a fact of human nature, right? And you thank your lucky stars that you're not part of it. So we can observe from the sidelines. But it's not pleasant, but it is interesting.
Yeah, it was definitely something I agree with you, and I think that I've always been drawn to that kind of stuff. But looking through it, with my hands over my eyes, peeking out, with my fingers spread a little bit to look like, I've always had this push-pull. The new book that I'm working on right now is very much about that, the idea of like, I'm really into some fucked up stuff, but I'm also very judgmental of other people who are into the exact same thing. These are conversations I have with my therapist a lot about, like, these double standards that I hold of, like, you're a fucking weirdo if you read this, but I've got stacks of it. Like,
right.
I'm with you on that. Although I did throw all my Dave Sim comics in the trash when he started working with Comicsgate people, but that's a different story.
Yeah, I think that the Comicsgate connection is the least of his transgressions.
Oh, sure,
yeah.
Sure. No, he's a lunatic. Pure and simple. He's
certifiable.
Fucking crazy. And he's been crazy for decades. It's not new.
Yeah, but he kept the crazy in check for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And then the crazy became a living thing. And the crazy was dictating the content of the comics, as opposed to that guy that did, well, let's just say Cerebus 1 to maybe 75, 80, right? That guy was totally in charge. He knew what he was doing. He was creating a work of fiction that head and shoulders was far above anything being published at the time. And then that darkness kind of crept into the work to the point where it eclipsed the need to tell the story of Cerebus, and it became more the need to tell the story of Dave Sim and what he thinks about women and sexuality and God and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's on one hand, it's very sad to see, because if you invest your creativity into something for decades and you're telling this 300 issue story, and then you just allow this worm to creep into the apple to the point where it just consumes everything. Like, that's, on one hand, it's sad to see, but on the other hand, it's fascinating. Like, to view this downfall of this creative individual who at one point was regarded as one of the best. And towards the end of Cerebus, when he just went totally off the rails, people are like, what the fuck is he doing? Like, this is not the mission statement. It's so far removed. Yeah. It's not even funny. Yeah. But, I mean, look at the movies you and I watch. Anybody, if there was somebody lurking in the shadows as we're watching this shit, they'd be like, what is wrong with these guys? But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, this is the shit that lights my world up. You know?
I'm constantly worried that my wife's going to walk downstairs in the middle of some crazy thing. And that's the thing. Like, you talk about artists with obsessions. Like, I'll watch Andy Milligan movies multiple times, which is, that in and of itself is insane to spend more than.
I agree, but I totally understand.
Yeah. But so it's just that thing of, you're just like, it's more about trying to figure out, like, how is this person's mind wired, and tapping into it in some way. And I think we do that with anything that we enjoy, regardless of the debatable quality of it. I think certain things are more universal. The pieces fit together more nicely, and it works on a frequency that everybody can tap into. And, like the things that are working like that right now are like, the Deadpool Wolverine movie, which is insane. Like, I've seen clips from it, and it's wild to me that this is one of the most successful movies of all time. And you step back and, like, what even is it? Like, it's just it's so insane that is what is catching fire with the zeitgeist. And that's not I haven't seen it, so I'm not talking about the quality of the movie, but just the elements of what that movie is.
Yeah, it's very strange.
If you showed that to someone 30 years in the past, could they even fathom what was happening in it?
No.
Yeah.
I don't think you would enjoy it, but I think you would understand it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I've watched maybe 15 minutes worth of clips. Yeah.
But I mean, look at the work of Jess Franco, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be in love with a woman, so totally and completely in love with a woman, and use her as a prop in your movies where she's doing the most reprehensible things. And it's like that fascinates me. Like, where does love end and the need to make art begin? Like, if you, and people listening, if you haven't seen the movies of Jess Franco, I recommend you check them out, but be warned, they're not for the faint of heart. As an example, he used his wife, Lena Romay, in movies where she was essentially, I mean, she's a beautiful woman until she wasn't, but a beautiful woman that he would put in situations where the average husband would not allow his wife to be put into these situations, so to say. And he filmed it with such, like, if you see Jess Franco's films, there's an element where there's a very voyeuristic element to it, where he's focusing on parts of his wife's anatomy for tens of minutes. It's just, it's very hard to watch. But to pull back and to think, like, would I allow, or would I be a party to this kind of treatment to someone that I claim to love? I don't know. Like, two dicks, one mouth. Like, but Jess was just like, yeah, we got to get the scene, man. It's in the script. We got to do it. And I think it takes a very special person like a Dave Sim or like a Barry Blair or even a Robert Crumb to do something like that, where the art becomes the fixation at the expense of whatever society deems appropriate, right? And I'm sure she was in on the joke, right? Lena seemed very willing to do whatever.
Sure. Yeah, very simpatico relationship.
I think it's one of cinema's most beautiful relationships. And I know I hesitate to say beautiful because there was a lot of pornography involved and a lot of manipulation and thank you. But at the core, Jess and Lena were amazing together.
Well, yeah, and it wasn't a Linda Lovelace, Chuck Trainer situation by any means. It
No.
was, they were business partners as well as artistic partners and then romantic partners. So they were on equal footing for sure.
Yeah, and if you showed the movies to people who have never been privy to Jess's work, you'd be like, this is the outcome? This is what he was going for? This is terrible. It's not terrible. It compared to the Hollywood standard, it's not of that lowest common denominator level where everybody can watch it. And, his work is certainly not feel good by any means, but it's real. That's the thing about Jess Franco's movies. They're real. Yeah. And he would exploit the fact that he was married to a very beautiful woman and use her in situations that 99.9% of the husbands would not allow their wives to be put in, but he did it for the art. And that's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
David's like, what?
Yeah. Sorry, David.
No, dude. Sorry, nothing. This is great.
Yeah, it's nuts.
I enjoy being a listener. So
I am a huge fan of Jess Franco. And
we don't, Jason and I don't get to hear Vince gush like that.
No.
When it's just us. So
but again, if you ever saw the films, you'd be like, what? This? But no, there's a, if you don't know, you don't know. Right?
Yeah, and things just hit you in the right way at the right time. I remember Jason talking about finally watching the original Evil Dead, and just it didn't work for him at all.
Which is
I understand it. Like,
yeah,
I wouldn't argue with it. I wouldn't try to explain it to him as, oh no, you missed this. Like, I mean, I probably could try to convey what it was like to see that movie when it first came out, but that would not change how he views the film just as a viewer. So, similarly, like, I would never suggest that he watched Female Vampire. No. Or Lorna the Exorcist.
I was just going to say that, Lorna the Exorcist.
He'd make it like 10 minutes into it. So,
but again, Jason's not wired like you or I.
He's had an actual electrician come in and do his wiring, whereas we did it ourselves, and it's all mangled. And
half of the wires are missing.
Chewing gum and paper clips.
Yeah, it's very true.
But our brains look like that thing that E.T. made out of the Speak and Spell.
I mean, it's order and chaos. Vince thrives on chaos. He loves it, and Jason needs his Excel cell spreadsheet. So it's the yin and yang. So yeah, his mind definitely isn't wired.
And I wouldn't expect him. Like, I mean, does that make me love him any less?
He wouldn't be. No, he wouldn't be who he is.
Right.
Yep.
But I always know that there's one guy I can go to talk about this stuff, and that's Matthew.
And Zach.
Yes. Yeah, Zach too. Zach's a recent convert. Zach's younger than both you or I.
Okay.
So, I mean, he gets it too, but yeah.
But he's got the patches on the elbows.
Yeah,
so
he's looking for the scholarly interpretation of Jess Franco. I'm not. Yeah. I just want to see his wife sucking a dick. That's all I want to see. Yeah. All right. Let me look at the clock on the wall. And oh boy, yeah, we're in the zone.
Your travels.
Yeah, we would love to thank you for listening to this episode. Matthew's always a joy. We hope you liked it. If you did, please do us a favor and leave us a review at wherever you listen to this. It's important. It matters. It's the way the machine works. So if you would be kind, leave us a review. Check out our sponsor, cheapgraphicnovels.com, where you can get all of the books that you want to read at the price you want to pay. They're amazing. Massively discounted, free shipping on your first order if you're a new convert. There's nothing better. cheapgraphicnovels.com. Patreon.com/11 o'clock comics. That's where we live on the Patreon. We have 2 tiers. $5 gets you a bonus episode and a multi-hour episode of outtakes that nobody else gets to hear. Is it enjoyable? Well, like the work of Jess Franco, that is entirely up to you. Yeah, it's just weird, fucked up, shitty stuff that nobody gets to hear. So if you're into that, as I am, check out our Patreon. $10 gets you that and access to the Clubhouse, the Slack, where we many people talk every day. And I don't mention this enough, but I'm going to right now. There are a bunch of freebies that are associated with the Slack, where digital freebies. David puts a page a day where it'll be a creative team from the past in sequential order, where you can look at a splay of pages from notable works and see how the artists progress over time. I throw up, that's a good way to put it. I throw up fanzines. You get to download a fanzine every day. There's also a out of print section where you can download an out of print book that is decades old, that is not infringing on anyone's copyrights, but they're important and they're there, and you can so you get a comic book every day, you get a fanzine every day, you get a cover of a team up, whether it be Marvel team up, Brave and the Bold, something that involves one character teaming with another. There's so much that we offer on the Slack that, I also have to remind our regular Slackers, like, you guys aren't taking advantage of this stuff that we're just putting up every day. That's how much stuff we have on the Slack. So if you would like to check that out, go to patreon.com/11o'clockcomics. In your travels, oh man, that was long-winded. Let's see what I have here. What did I read? Okay. I got caught up on Venom War. Yes, Venom War. I'm a sucker for the symbiotes. You say symbiote, I say how high. Is this high art? No. It knows what it is. It's playing to its audience. And I think it's been very successful to date. There is a alternate reality future version of Eddie Brock called Mercurius that has unleashed a symbiote that not only takes over the host organism, but turns them into a zombie as well. So there's a series now called Venom War Zombiotes, which is drawn by Juan Jose Rip. And it is absolutely amazing. It's basically She-Hulk, Patsy Walker, Hellcat, versus a mob of symbiote zombies, where you have the, what was that series, David? Blank Foes of Spider-Man.
Oh, there was the
Deadly Foes of Spider-Man.
The Deadly Foes, the Sinister Foes, yeah.
So you got Shocker, Speed Demon, like those types of characters trying to pull off a heist and being thrown into this scenario with the zombies. So it sounds more intricate than it actually is. It's basically Juan Jose Rip chewing up every page with massive amounts of detail. And it is
of characters chewing up other characters.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing to look at. Again, is it high art? Depending on your perspective, yeah. I think it is.
Considering what comes out of his pen, yes.
Right. The art is the reason to.
The detail is high end.
Yeah, that's the reason to come into the club. But I mean, if you want to see hordes of symbiote zombies and She-Hulk just mashing the shit out of them, it's great. It's like, I love licorice. I can't just eat one piece of licorice. It activates that part of my brain that just makes me totally happy. Venom War is my licorice. It's not great, but it's comfort and it's sugar and it's immediate rush. So I'm enjoying it. Your opinion may differ, but I think Venom War is a lot of fun. There's a Venom War Spider-Man miniseries. It's drawn by Greg Land, so the art sucks ass, but the story's really good. Like, Peter finally comes to terms with the symbiote, and they bury the hatchet. It's like, yeah, you're not so bad. You've done some good things. You realize what is good and what is bad. And so Peter bonds once again with the original symbiote, with the black costume. It's fun. There's not a whole lot of heavy lifting. So, I mean, if you're in the mood for a good time, check out Venom War. It's pretty much everywhere in the Marvel Universe now. There's a Venom War miniseries featuring Natasha, Black Widow, who has bonded with a symbiote called Sliver. And it just so happens that the costume resulting from her bond with the symbiote is very much like the costume she wore when she was tooling around with Daredevil. Like the ovals around the belt, the stinger gauntlets. It's just fun. It's not going to change the world, but it's making me happy. So if you want to be happy and read comics, I think you should check out Venom War.
Comics should make you happy.
Yeah.
The Venom War Spider-Man is written by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing, which is why I probably enjoyed it as much as I did. And it was also...
The art's so bad, though.
It is. But this is where I was introduced to the evil future Eddie Brock, known as Meridius. But yeah, Meridius. I've only read these two issues.
It's so dumb, though. There's Eddie Brock, who's at odds with his son Dylan.
And Dylan Brock. Yeah.
So they both create their own teams, and they throw down in a wrestling ring. What? Who wrote this? Al Ewing wrote it, but it's just so weird. It is really weird. And then you have Peter entering into the fray, who doesn't shoot webs, but he shoots chains.
And we all mocked the cover when it was announced.
We
months
did,
ago.
because it sucks.
And
it sucks.
Even this week, when on the Slack, again, plug, Vince mentioned that he read what he read regarding Venom War and how excited he was about it, even though as silly as it is.
It's goofy.
I commented on the cover, and yes, as Vince replied, the cover, the chains, the smiling Peter, it all does make sense within the context of the story.
Yeah,
and the suit basically tells them that they're I'm more than just a costume, just an outfit you can wear. I've become steel, and
yeah.
I mean it not necessarily. I mean, yes, of course, you look at chains, and that's fine. Your mind can visualize, but I mean, you could still have a steel fucking web line. But yes,
I'm wondering if it's not a pastiche on Spawn in some way. No, seriously, why would Peter shoot
You're
chains?
right.
Like, it doesn't make any sense. It does make sense, like, just because the symbiote says, "I'm steel." Like, what does that even mean? It's so goofy. But it's self-aware in a sense that it knows it's stupid and goofy, and it's just entertaining you for whatever period of time you read the issue. It's not going to change the world. It's not going to be a landmark in comics history. It's probably going to be forgotten, not long after the last issue drops. But for right now, for this moment in time, it's making me very happy.
It's even got
Carnage is involved in
all-time favorite characters jackpot, where you can see
it's a stupid idea.
On a page with 3 panels, Jackpot's face is different in all 3.
Yeah, I just want to know who thought it was a really good idea to give Mary Jane powers. I don't think they should have called her They should have called her Super Whore. Right? Because
it's
Mary
that's on
Jane.
The nose. You don't need a code name if that's what's going to be.
If you embrace it, if you're Mary Jane Watson, you're Super Whore. That's what you should be called. And she's called Jackpot. Yeah, isn't that funny? Face it, Tiger,
Face
you
it,
hit the
Tiger?
jackpot. It's so stupid. Matthew would absolutely hate it.
I kind of zoned out as you were talking.
Yeah, that's
about
good.
it.
I mean, I'm glad. I'm glad you did, because there's nothing good's going to come of this other than I think at the end of the day, it's a very good way to waste your time. If you're a fan of Spider-Man, Peter Parker especially, and the symbiotes, you could do worse. That's it. It's got a wrestling component to it, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's there. Yeah, it's
Especially if you're not going to bring Rocky Grimm into it.
Right. Unlimited class wrestling. Where's Ben? He's not here. It's so stupid. I'm going to change the subject because we spent way more on Venom War than it deserves. If you're looking to have a good time, read Venom War.
Okay.
Yeah, it's it.
This wasn't intentional, but sticking with Marvel, in your travels, the 4th issue of the limited series by Garth Ennis and Jason Burrows, inks by Guillermo Ortega, colors by Nolan Woodard. It is Get Fury. It is probably I'm not even gonna say probably. It is my it's my favorite issue of the series so far. Whereas the subplots and the whole concept of the story may have, for me, dragged a little in the first 3 issues to get to a certain point. This issue moves things along at a pretty good clip. We definitely get some backstory as to a couple of characters in the story and how they're related to Nick Fury. We're still Castle. Frank is extremely quiet in this issue. The fewer words are the better as far as he's concerned. He doesn't. He's not trying to get to know anybody. He's here for a mission, but of course the people who put them on this mission are running their own game, and we only get a couple of pages on that. This is one of those subplots I was referring to, but I thought that the 4th issue just gave us it's a part of the story we needed, but like I said, it didn't. Whereas previous issues dragged a little for me, we're kind of ramping things up because we got the 5th issue, and then and I think it's a 6-issue series, so we're past the halfway point. But no, the art Bros is fantastic. I definitely like his character work, at least as far as the main characters go. But I mean, it's Garth writing Frank Castle, which he's absolutely fantastic at.
Yeah.
Along with Nick Fury, who really, aside from one picture, one panel in a flashback, that's pretty much all we get of the character that Castle is supposed to be getting in this series. But yeah, it's a great story.
And if you can't get enough of Garth Ennis, check out Hello Darkness, #1 from Boom. It's a horror anthology, and Garth teams up with Becky Cloonan to tell a great story. It's the first chapter of what looks to be a really good story. Yeah, I won't say any more if you haven't read it, but it's very well done. Yeah, it's everything I wanted from the EC comics at Oni.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It's a really good horror anthology. Unlike,
did you check out the Oni joints, Matthew?
No, I have not.
yeah, don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just don't. Yeah.
What you got, Matthew?
Well, in your travels, I recently picked up the Rebellion 2000 AD Definitive Edition of Nemesis the Warlock, Volume 1. I'm assuming Volume 1 is pretty much everything that Kevin O'Neill drew I know Vince has talked about this series and gone into what the story is and the characters, but this is really a showcase for O'Neill's art because most of it's printed in black and white. There's some color cover reproductions, but there's like sketchbook pages in here, preliminary drawings. If you love Kevin O'Neill, this is a beautiful showcase for his artwork. Pretty thick book. I want to say it's about 200 pages, oversized. It's a great book to just like put on some Annihilator or Voivod and crank. Yeah, it feels like. I mean, I look at this artwork and I'm like, yeah, this is what you'd be looking at while you listen to that. So,
Dimension Hatros, yeah.
Yeah, it's like looking at this stuff is like looking at some 8th grade stoner's notebook in 1982, like what they would be drawing. It's just, I love Kevin O'Neill's artwork so much. And I wish he had drawn a Gwar comic. He'd be the perfect artist to draw Gwar.
100%. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's hard to believe that Mr. O'Neill is no longer with us.
I know.
Yeah. And it's also, I mean, the what was the last League of Extraordinary Gentlemen called? The last miniseries. Do you remember?
Good question. I remember you talking about it.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of it, but I'm glad that they ended on that because I recently read the last of the Nemo books, and it's not very good. Like, it just seems like both Alan and Kevin's hearts really weren't in it. But the last League book was very good. So, yeah, I'm blanking on the name of the last one. But the third in the Nemo books is, I got it for $5 at Heroes, and I mean, visually it's okay, but it's not. It doesn't have that spark that the other League stuff has. It just seems like, yeah, we got to finish this thing. Let's just do it. It's Alan Moore, so okay, it's a cut above the regular stuff, but it's not good Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill. It's very odd. It's disjointed. It's weird.
How has that stuff been? Like, are there good collected editions of all that stuff for someone who doesn't have a lot of it?
No, they persist with the single volumes, and it's hard to. Yeah, there's not one giant League of Extraordinary Gentlemen omnibus, which is weird. Okay. You would think there would be. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Did you order the again? I don't know the name of it. Something London. Alan Moore's forthcoming novel, the first part of a trilogy, where he explores the magical landscape of London. Like, I am so locked into that wow. I cannot wait till it comes. Yeah. Yeah, but that's what he excels at: magic and history and putting things in perspective in relation to other notable instances. Like, that's Alan Moore's bread and butter, and I'm so down. But I've read the League thing and I was just like, I wasn't moved by it, which is very strange because usually I close the cover on an Alan Moore book thinking, like, there's a reason why this guy's the GOAT. This is great, but this wasn't. The last Nemo was not great.
Yeah, maybe there's some things in there that a second reading might reveal.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And again, it all comes down to mindset. Like, what was my day like when I read it? Were there factors impacted? Like, I'm sure it's Alan Moore, so it's probably of a level that supersedes other work, but I didn't give it its due. I walked away from my first reading not being very impressed by it. It's just really weird. But we hope that you were impressed by this because we had a good time. Matthew's always a good addition to the 11 O'Clock Comics formula. Matthew, anything you want to plug or direct them to?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's an issue of Metal Hurlant, which might have a story of interest to people that just got released. I honestly don't know how to get it. In fact, I was going to ask you, did you even get your comps?
I did not, no.
Okay, I'm going to have to reach out because I know the editor, there's a new editor, and just see what's up with that. But yeah, the latest issue of Metal Hurlant has a story by myself and Mr. Vince B. And then 2 issues from now, I did a story that was illustrated by Jonathan Wayshak. And if you're not familiar with his work, it's fantastic. He's very much in the Simon Bisley vein. So I believe that would be issue 15 that one will be out. So, but if you follow me on Instagram, I'll be announcing that.
Nice. And when Matthew says the story was created by himself and me, I basically took the leash off Matthew and let him do what he wanted to do. And I just gleefully observed as he plied his trade. And it's a wonderful story.
Yeah, I was very pleased with it. I'm very excited to see it in print. So, and supposedly they are doing English language editions of all the issues to this point. They've been working on it for a while. Again, once I have that information, I'll let people know when that stuff will be available in English. So, and maybe somehow, if people really want to read it in English, we could kind of figure out a way to do that for people. But we'll see.
Yeah, the whole revival of heavy metal was so weird. Like, it was supposed to come out from Massive, and they promoted the shit out of it, and then it came to the point where just like, oh yeah, all those issues you paid for, they're not going to come out. We're not doing it.
Was that recently?
Yeah, I think they solicited 3 issues.
Okay, so the editor that I had worked with way back whenever that was, end of 2019, he reached out to me to say they were looking for contributors to upcoming issues, and he asked if I'd be interested. I said, yeah. We started chatting on Instagram, and then nothing ever came of it. So, yeah, I have no idea.
Well, I mean, it was a thing because, again, the issues were solicited, and it was a very comfortable price point. I think it was like $10 for 128 pages or wow, around there. And I was like, yeah, heavy metal, sure. I mean, because it's no secret that I was not enamored with the Morrison piloted heavy metal. And then everything that came after, like with Tim Seeley and stuff, it just, it was only heavy metal in name. Right? So, I mean, that's a huge pedigree to me. To produce something called heavy metal and not be at least 50% comparable to what has come before, because you're never like Watchmen, you're never going to reach those heights.
Part of that is someone who was somewhat involved. I'm just going to speak about myself here, but like, I am nowhere near the level of Serpieri, of Liberatore, Mobius,
I totally disagree, but
it's going to sound like I'm trashing myself, but like, if they hired me, then maybe the standards weren't high enough for the kind of content they were doing, because what I contributed, I don't think was anywhere near it wasn't Corbin, it wasn't so I guess that's the thing, again, going back to what we were saying, like, the people who are doing really cool, interesting work don't necessarily need heavy metal to get it out there. They're just doing it on their own, and you'd have to really cultivate a certain group of artists to get involved with that. And I think that the name heavy metal just doesn't have the cachet that it used to have.
I agree with that.
To draw those people in.
Yeah, I agree with that. But you're kind of pissing me off a little bit when you say that you're not up to the challenge, because you, of all people, I think are. Like, okay, let's be honest. You're not Richard Corbin. But I don't think, like Jeff Johns with Doomsday Clock, I don't think you fall on your face in an endeavor called heavy metal. I think you represent yourself very well. You are of a level that is far better than most out there. So yeah, I would totally include you in a heavy metal revival, because you're that good.
I appreciate you saying that. I think the thing that happened with me on that story, so it was the story that Phil Hester wrote, part of it was that I'm still pretty new to making comics, so there were elements in Phil's script that I just couldn't render. I'm just not a good enough artist to render what he had in the script, because the script was fantastic. I went into that story thinking, I was looking specifically at Drulier, and I thought, I want to make this type of artwork, and it was too constipated. Like, I just didn't let loose. I felt too... I put these, stipulations on myself of what this comic should look like, and it should have been big and vibrant, and it was just very small, and it was about giant creatures. So I feel like I failed in that regard, because I wasn't being open to what I think that book is really about, which is just like total expression. So that's the only reason why I say that. Well,
yeah, I'll allow it.
Okay,
but I don't agree with it. Yeah,
okay,
whatever. Hey, everybody. Thank you for being here with us once again. We hope you come back next time. Unfortunately, I don't have anything queued up for DAP, so I'm going to wing it as usual. In the meantime, get yourself to a comic book shop. Buy something, read something, talk about it online. Because that's the magic of comics. You can enjoy it on one level, and then you can talk about the comic with like-minded individuals and maybe uncover things you didn't in your initial read through. Like, it's just wonderful. Fandom is a wonderful thing. So, and then come back here next time, because we'll probably be talking about it as well. So in the meantime, say good night. I don't know. I got nothing. I should have queued up something. David.
Good night.
I really meant to do some Night of the Living Dead sound clips for Matthew's participation, but I didn't. I didn't get to it.
Aww. David.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. Come back here next time, because we love you so much, and we couldn't do this without you. So once again, thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
You just made this a joy.
Thanks,
we went places that I assumed we'd go, and I'm glad. I can always count on the tangents whenever you come, and that's a wonderful thing.
Oh, yeah, it was enjoyable. I always love being here, and let's do it again.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yeah, and watch the films of Jess Franco.
Well, spooky season's coming, I'm sure. You will return.
Not so much. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Halloween's coming up. Didn't we do Creepshow last year, or was it the year before? I think maybe it was a couple years ago. I think it was the year
before.
Yeah,
that was 2020.
Oh, my goodness.
Chris was on with this, right?
Yep.
Or was that... Okay, yeah.
Wait, Chris was on with us?
Yeah, it was either 2020. Yeah, my book came out through Ad House in 2020. It may have been 2021, but that seems awfully late. I'm almost certain 2020.
You came back, and then, but yeah.
But the Creepshow one we did Chris, and then he took off, and then we talked about Creepshow.
Wow. So here's the deal. For Halloween this year, you pick a horror book, you come back, we'll talk about it.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Hey, everybody.
Yeah, and something we can all get that like you and Vince probably just don't have squirreled somewhere in a bookcase somewhere.
No, I will make sure that it's something that's easily accessible, and by that point, my horror comic will be up for pre-order, hopefully. So, let's do it.
Excellent.
I can just imagine Anthony's chub right now over this episode.
Yeah, Anthony's a good man. He's got good taste. He loves Matthew. Yes. Yeah. Who doesn't? Yeah. All right, we'll be back, people. Maybe Jason will be back next episode. Maybe not. Whatever. We'll be here. Just come back.
Yeah, we might have something special.
We always have something special.
Oh, I know that. But something else.
Couldn't talk about Houses of the Unholy tonight because Jason wants to talk about it. Whatever.
Yes. And don't forget to read Black Hole for Book of the Month.
Yes, Black Hole is the book of the month.
Ooh, wow, okay.
Or the classic book. Yes, the classic bonus episode book.
Why, you want to sit on that, Matthew? Black Hole?
I don't I don't own it anymore.
What?
I got my copy from the library across the street.
I sold all my individual issues because I was broke, and I have the artist edition, which isn't complete. But
Humble brag.
so I'd have to buy the collection again. But no, I will sit that one out. But
All right.
thank you, though.
Nice. I have some Black Hole comics that are related to Black Hole, but I don't know if they're in the collected edition.
I'll let you
Like
know.
Blood Club?
No, yeah, those aren't. I don't think those are in the collected edition. Yeah.
But why not? Like, aren't they part? I think they're related to the story, right?
Well, the Teenage Plague technically is sort of a precursor to it, I believe.
Right. Like, why?
But the stories with Tony, yeah, I mean, it's all of a world.
Yeah. So tune in for that. Well, if you're a patron, you get the Blood Club. Or not Blood, you get the Black Hole episode, which is coming very soon. Jason, I think we're recording Sunday, aren't we?
Possibly, yes, if the stars align, yes.
Yeah. If Jason's hoity-toity deems us necessary to waste his time.
It saves us with his presence, yes.
We're out of here. Tell them you love them.
Love you.
Love you.
That's it for that one.